Imagine this. The future Queen of Belgium is presented with a dazzling tiara, a gift from a dictator. But years later, it's discovered that the stones in this royal crown are fake. Some were even taken from a statue of the Virgin Mary. Why did nuns secretly sell off the rubies? How did a jewel that once sparkled at royal banquets around the world suddenly vanish without a trace? And most shockingly, why did the queen herself never deny the rumors that she had been wearing a forgery? In this story, you'll learn how a quiet nurse from Madrid became a queen with a tiara full of secrets. You'll discover who tried to cover up the truth and what may have really happened to this legendary crown. Was it lost forever? Or is it still hiding somewhere behind palace walls? The most shocking part comes at the end. Stay with us. In the early 1960s, Europe was breathing the air of change. But some things remained constant. The public's fascination with royal families, their choices, their destinies, and of course, their weddings. In Belgium, people waited with bated breath for their young King Baudouin to finally introduce his bride to the world. Ever since he ascended to the throne in 1951, after the abdication of his father, King Leopold III, Baudouin had led a quiet, reserved life, far from the glittering spotlight. Despite his royal status, he remained a mystery, which worried both the political elite and ordinary citizens. The country didn't just need a queen, it needed a symbol of hope, a woman who would become the heart of the monarchy and the face of a new era. Since the king himself showed little interest in socializing or seeking a wife, the church decided to step in. Cardinal Leo Suenens, one of Belgium's most influential clergymen, understood that something had to be done. If destiny wasn't coming to the king, then perhaps it needed a little divine encouragement. And so he turned to someone he trusted completely, Sister Veronica O'Brien, a nun with sharp intuition, excellent taste, and, as it turned out, a remarkable talent for royal matchmaking. Inspired by her mission, Sister Veronica set off on a journey across Europe, visiting noble Catholic families in search of the right woman. The list of requirements was short but essential: noble lineage and deep faith. These two qualities alone were enough to define a future queen consort, and it was in the heart of Spain, in a quiet home in Madrid, that she found her, a young woman with gentle eyes and a modest smile, who had no idea her life was about to change forever. Fabiola de Mora and Aragon had no desire for fame. She worked as a nurse, choosing to care for others rather than chase status or attention. Though she came from aristocracy, and her godmother was none other than Queen Victoria Eugenie of Spain, Fabiola lived a humble, almost austere life. In fact, she had seriously considered joining a convent. Her calm presence, intelligence, and deeply spiritual nature made a powerful impression on Sister Veronica, who wrote excitedly to the cardinal. "She's like a breath of fresh air, tall, slender, graceful, with a serene beauty, full of life, intellect, and energy." When Baudouin read the description of the potential bride, he agreed to meet her. No one expected that this carefully arranged meeting would spark something real. Their first encounter was quiet, without fanfare, but the atmosphere was undeniable. The way they looked at each other, their subtle gestures, the unspoken connection, it was clear that something had clicked between them. And very quickly, everyone around them saw it too. They were a perfect match. The wedding preparations began swiftly. Belgium came alive. Newspapers ran front-page stories about the royal couple. Palace florists planned cathedral decorations, and royal jewelers began preparing displays for the incoming wave of state gifts. The entire nation followed each step, because this wasn't just a wedding. It was the beginning of a new chapter for the monarchy. The ceremony was set for December 15th, 1960, the day when a quiet nurse from Madrid would become the fifth queen consort of the Belgians. And as the future queen received precious gifts from across Europe, one stood out above the rest, not for its size or brilliance, but for the story it carried. It came from Spain, and not just from any noble family, but from General Franco himself and his wife Carmen Polo. Inside a gleaming case was a tiara, delicate, complex, and full of symbolism. No one could have guessed that this piece of jewelry would become the centerpiece of a tale filled with secrets, whispers, and a truth that would remain hidden for years to come. The tiara gifted to the future Queen of Belgium by Franco's regime seemed at first glance like a well-mannered diplomatic gesture, but beneath its glittering surface lay something far more layered. This wasn't just a courteous present between nations, it was a symbol, carrying silent messages, historical undertones, and an origin shrouded in quiet complexity. Fabiola received the tiara at her family's palace on Zurbano Street in Madrid. The atmosphere of the occasion was solemn, almost ceremonial. Carmen Polo, wife of General Franco, personally presented the elegant case, accompanied by a carefully worded speech about the friendship between Spain and Belgium. Inside was a piece that immediately captured attention, a closed ducal crown designed in the heraldic style typical of Spain's historic noble houses, reminiscent of those worn by the House of Alba or the House of Medinaceli. This wasn't simply a decorative item, it was a statement. The base of the tiara was crafted from a continuous row of white diamonds, from which rose 8 stylized florets, acanthus leaf shapes, each interspersed with round pearls. In the center of every floret sat a colored stone, sometimes rubies, sometimes emeralds, and in later versions, aquamarines. But this wasn't just about beauty, it was about functionality. The tiara could be worn in multiple forms, as a closed crown, as a lighter open wreath-style tiara, or even transformed into a necklace. The central stones were interchangeable, allowing the piece to change character depending on the occasion, the dress, or even the political message being sent. And that wasn't all. Along with the main structure, Fabiola was given a second version, a lighter, steel-based frame designed to hold 7 of the 8 detachable florets. This configuration offered even more flexibility, perfect for informal banquets, diplomatic receptions, or events where a full crown might feel too ostentatious. It was a masterstroke of royal design, a jewel built not just to shine, but to adapt. Soon after, whispers began to circulate about the tiara's true origin. Some claimed it wasn't newly made, but in fact an antique piece once belonging to the powerful house of Medinaceli. That theory gained traction when a 19th century portrait surfaced in the Museum of the Duke of Lerma Foundation in Toledo. Painted by Edouard Dubouf, it depicted Doña Ángela Pérez de Barradas y Bernoulli, Duchess of Medinaceli, wearing a crown strikingly similar to Fabiola's new tiara. Was it the same piece? Had it been discreetly acquired by the Spanish state from aristocratic hands? Or was this a subtle handover of a historic jewel, cloaked in ceremony? Whatever the case, one thing was clear: this tiara did not appear out of nowhere. Its past was as intricate and layered as the politics of post-war Spain. Despite growing speculation, the tiara was received in Belgium with great enthusiasm. On December 14th, the night before her royal wedding, Fabiola debuted the piece publicly at a grand reception held at the Royal Palace in Brussels. Though the tiara sparkled with undeniable brilliance, it didn't overwhelm the bride. On the contrary, it complemented her perfectly. It emphasized her calm grace, her quiet strength, her understated dignity. Guests were impressed. The press took notice. Royal watchers across Europe turned their attention to the Spanish jewel now crowning a Belgian queen. But in the hushed corners of palace corridors and diplomatic drawing rooms, a question lingered, a question that wouldn't go away. Was this tiara hiding something? Rumors, like smoke, never stay in one place. They seep through cracks, climb staircases, and cross borders effortlessly, especially when they revolve around a royal jewel, a wedding gift given to a future queen. At first, it sounded like a quiet, almost reverent legend. Whispers that the tiara received by Fabiola from the Franco regime had once adorned not the head of a noblewoman, but a statue of the Virgin Mary in a Spanish convent. In those days, that wasn't so unusual. In post-war Europe, monasteries often became the last safe haven for family treasures, shielding them from confiscation, theft, or political chaos. But this story didn't end with safe storage. According to several accounts, the convent that housed the jewel fell into serious financial trouble. And in a desperate effort to keep their community afloat, the nuns allegedly made a decision that would echo through history. They removed the original rubies and emeralds from the tiara, sold them discreetly, and replaced them with glass imitations, carefully colored and shaped to match. The form remained, the sparkle too, but the essence had changed. At first, the story circulated in quiet murmurs, passed between jewelers, courtiers, and discreet collectors. But soon, it grew into something louder, something harder to ignore. And then came the moment of truth. After the royal wedding, the tiara was handed over to the jewelers of the Belgian royal court for a routine inspection and minor adjustments to fit Fabiola's head. But under the magnifying lens, under specialized lighting and microscopic precision, they saw what couldn't be unseen. Some of the colored stones were not gemstones at all. They were beautifully cut glass, flawless in appearance, but unmistakably fake. The Belgian court responded quietly, yet firmly. The Spanish side was informed, and the reaction was swift. No one wanted an international scandal. A solution was needed, and it came in the form of Carrera, one of Spain's most prestigious jewelry houses. The firm was tasked with replacing the fake stones with real ones, authentic rubies and emeralds, carefully selected and masterfully cut to restore the tiara's original glory. In time, a third set of stones, aquamarines, was also added as a personal gift from King Baudouin to match a suite of Brazilian jewelry gifted to the royal couple on an official visit. No public statement was ever made. Neither the Belgian royal palace nor the Spanish government confirmed or denied the incident. Officially, everything remained as polished as ever. But behind closed doors, the story lingered. To some, it was just a rumor, a myth born of intrigue and idle curiosity. To others, it was a quiet diplomatic crisis that had been swiftly and elegantly buried. What stood out most, though, was Queen Fabiola's own response. None. She never commented, never denied, never corrected the narrative. Instead, she continued to wear the tiara, proudly, gracefully, and without hesitation. It was as if she was saying, "I am not defined by stones, but by what I represent." From that point on, the tiara became more than just a crown. It became a part of her identity, a symbol of silent strength and quiet resilience. The more people whispered about its past, the more powerful her image became. Because perhaps, just perhaps, the true brilliance of the tiara didn't lie in the stones at all, but in the woman who chose to wear it on her own terms. Over time, the jewel that had once started as a diplomatic gesture and elegant gift transformed into one of the most recognizable symbols of the Belgian monarchy. But it wasn't because of its monetary value or origin. What made Queen Fabiola's tiara truly iconic was its extraordinary versatility. This wasn't a piece meant to sit in a vault, nor was it a relic sealed behind museum glass. Quite the opposite. It lived. It traveled the world, changed shape, color, and character, as if it had a personality of its own. Queen Fabiola immediately understood the tiara's full potential, and there was more to it than anyone expected. The tiara's construction allowed for 6 different configurations. There was the classic ducal crown version, which could be worn with rubies, emeralds, or aquamarines, and a lighter, more ethereal variant, the floral tiara, built on a steel base, delicate and airy. Each of the 8 florets could be removed, and the stones at their centers easily swapped out. Everything depended on the occasion and on what the queen wished to communicate without saying a word. The ducal crown with rubies projected authority. It was reserved for grand galas, state visits, and ceremonial moments. In contrast, the aquamarine version had a softness to it, intimate, graceful, feminine. Interestingly, the aquamarines weren't part of the original Spanish gift. They were a personal addition from King Baudouin, given to complement a jewelry set Belgium had received from Brazil during an official visit. That gesture alone added a new dimension to the tiara, not just diplomatic, but now deeply personal. Fabiola didn't just use the tiara's possibilities, she played with them. In 1961, during a state visit to France, she wore the floral version with emeralds, understated yet elegant. 3 years later, at the wedding of King Constantine II of Greece and Princess Anne-Marie of Denmark, the tiara gleamed with rubies. In Japan in 1964, she returned to the classic ducal form, strong and formal. At the celebration of the 2500th anniversary of the Persian Empire in Persepolis in 1971, she surprised everyone by hanging a square emerald brooch, a gift from Baudouin, inherited from his grandmother, Princess Ingeborg of Sweden, from one of the floral elements. By then, the tiara was no longer just a crown. It had become a language, a visual code, a means of silent communication for those who knew how to read the signs. Sometimes, Fabiola wore just a single flower from the tiara, as a pendant on a fine chain, or as a brooch pinned to her gown. Other times, she created elaborate compositions. In one of her most memorable appearances, during a state visit to Spain in 1977, she suspended 3 of the tiara's largest florets from a striking Art Deco diamond sautoir. It was a symbolic moment, the jewel returning to the country where its legend began. This kind of freedom with royal jewelry was highly unusual. Traditionally, crowns and tiaras followed strict rules. They were worn by protocol, never reimagined. But Fabiola rewrote the rules. She gave the tiara a life of its own. It wasn't just decoration. It was a tool for image, for meaning, for subtle power. Perhaps this was the secret to her magnetism. She didn't try to outshine the tiara, but she never let it outshine her either. There was balance, almost a personal relationship. It was as though the two of them spoke silently to one another. And for those watching closely, every version of the tiara told a different story. A story of style, of strength, of royalty, and of silence that spoke louder than any speech. As time passed, even the brightest symbols of a royal era began to fade from view. They don't vanish suddenly, but gradually, like a melody that stops playing yet continues to echo in memory. In her later years, Queen Fabiola made fewer public appearances, but when she did, her style remained intact, reserved, deliberate, yet quietly powerful. The jewelry she wore continued to carry meaning, not just as decoration, but as an extension of her legacy. And yet, one tiara simply disappeared. No announcement, no explanation, no farewell. The last time it was seen was in the year 2000, during a formal gala at Laeken Castle. That evening, Queen Fabiola welcomed the King and Queen of Spain, Juan Carlos and Sofia. For the occasion, she wore one of the tiara's most delicate versions, the aquamarine setting. The choice was clearly symbolic. The crown returned to its country of origin, in the presence of those who now represented it. And then, silence. No more appearances, no photographs, no trace. The tiara vanished from the royal stage. When Queen Fabiola passed away in 2014, questions resurfaced. What had happened to the legendary tiara? Was it still in the royal collection? Was it passed down privately? Or had it been quietly retired, out of respect for its history and the woman who made it iconic? The mystery only deepened when other pieces from her collection began reappearing, now worn by Queen Mathilde. The Wolfers tiara, the diamond waterfall brooch, the Tunisian parure, all began to return to public life. It became clear that Fabiola's legacy wasn't forgotten. On the contrary, it was being carefully passed on. But the Spanish tiara remained silent. Some experts speculated that it had been privately bequeathed to extended family, outside the core of the royal house. Others believed that the tiara's unique backstory, blending politics, religion, and legend, made it too symbolically charged to be worn again without altering its meaning. This was no ordinary jewel. It was a story wrapped in diamonds. There were even more practical theories that the tiara had been dismantled and its most precious elements, like the aquamarines gifted by Baudouin, repurposed into more modern pieces. After all, this is a common practice among European royal houses. But in the case of this tiara, such an idea felt almost sacrilegious, too brutal, too final. To this day, no museum, no auction house, no official source has revealed its fate. The tiara has disappeared, as if, after decades of shining under lights and standing in the presence of presidents and kings, it simply chose to step away, taking with it all the secrets it ever held on a queen's brow. But maybe that's how it was meant to end. Maybe its disappearance wasn't a loss, but a ritual, a quiet goodbye, a royal departure. The tiara vanished, but it was never forgotten, and as long as no one knows exactly where it is, it still lives. In old photographs, in whispered conversations down palace halls, in the eyes of those still searching for its sparkle in the mirrors of history.